The chains bit into Celeste's wrists as the wagon rattled toward Blackmoor Castle. She had been sold. Not officially, of course. Officially, she was being sent to serve the Lycan king as part of her father's debt repayment. A diplomatic arrangement, her stepmother had called it, smiling that cold smile that never reached her eyes. A chance to bring honor to the family. But Celeste knew the truth. She was payment. A way to clear the gambling debts her father had accumulated over years of reckless spending. A burden finally disposed of, wrapped in the pretty language of service. The other servants in the wagon, 5 women, all from debtor families, huddled together in silence. They had been told what to expect. Long hours, harsh conditions, a lifetime of invisible labor in the kitchens and laundry rooms of the Lycan King's fortress. If they were lucky, if they were unlucky, well. The stories about what happened to servants who displeased their Lycan masters were not spoken aloud. They didn't need to be. The wagon lurched to a stop. Celeste heard voices outside. Guards, she assumed, checking the cargo. Human cargo. That's all they were now. The canvas flap was thrown back, and harsh sunlight flooded the wagon's interior. "Out!" a guard barked. "Single file, eyes down. Don't speak unless spoken to." Celeste climbed down on shaking legs, her chains clinking with every movement. The other women followed, forming a ragged line in the courtyard of Blackmoor Castle. The fortress loomed above them, all black stone and sharp angles, ancient and imposing against the grey sky. It looked exactly like the prison it was about to become. "Debt servants," a steward announced, checking names off a list. 6 women, as agreed. They're to be processed and assigned to... Wait. The voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. Everyone froze. The guards snapped to attention. The steward's face went pale. Celeste kept her eyes fixed on the ground, but she heard footsteps approaching. Heavy, deliberate, carrying the weight of absolute authority. This one. A hand appeared in her field of vision, large, powerful, with fingers that could have crushed stone. It caught her chin and tilted her face upward. Celeste found herself staring into eyes the color of molten gold. The Lycan King. He was everything the stories claimed, and more. Massive, towering over her by more than a foot. Dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from the mountains themselves. A jaw that spoke of centuries of command. An aura of power so intense it made the air feel thick. But it was his expression that stole her breath. He was looking at her like he'd been struck by lightning, like the world had just shifted beneath his feet, like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire existence. "What is your name?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. Celeste, Your Majesty." The words came out as a whisper. "Celeste Ashworth." Celeste. He said it like a prayer, like a promise. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, impossibly gentle for hands so large. "And you were sent here as a servant?" "Yes, Your Majesty, to repay my father's debts." Something dark flickered in his golden eyes. "Your father sold you." It wasn't a question. The arrangement was, "Your father sold you." The king's jaw tightened, fury rippling beneath the surface of his control. "He sold his own daughter to pay gambling debts, and he sent you here in chains." Celeste couldn't deny it, couldn't find the words to soften a truth that was exactly as ugly as he'd named it. The king released her chin and turned to his steward, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "Remove the chains, now." "Your Majesty, the protocol for debt servants requires—" "I said remove them." The steward scrambled to obey, fumbling with keys, unlocking the iron cuffs that had rubbed Celeste's wrists raw during the 3-day journey. The chains fell away, and she gasped at the sudden lightness, at the relief of being unbound. "The rest of you," the king addressed the other women, his voice marginally softer, "will be treated fairly. You will work, yes, but you will be paid wages, given proper quarters, and treated with dignity. Anyone who mistreats you will answer to me personally." The women stared, too shocked to respond. The king turned back to Celeste, and his expression shifted again, from cold fury to something almost tender. "You," he said, "are coming with me." "Your Majesty, I don't understand." "You will." He held out his hand. "Come." Celeste's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to obey, to follow, to place her hand in his. But confusion held her frozen. "I was sent as a servant," she said. "I'm supposed to not servant." The king's golden eyes blazed with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Future queen. The courtyard went silent. The guards, the steward, the other debt servants. Everyone stared, mouths agape, unable to process what they'd just heard. Celeste couldn't process it either. "That's not possible," she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm a debtor's daughter, sold to pay gambling losses. I have no title, no dowry, no—" "You have everything that matters." The king stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his heat wrapping around her like a cloak. "The moment you stepped out of that wagon, I felt it. The mate bond. The recognition that my soul has been waiting 300 years to feel. Mate bond." The words echoed in her mind, impossible and terrifying, and somehow, impossibly, true. "You're my mate, Celeste, my true mate, the other half of my soul." His voice cracked with emotion. "And I cannot, let you serve in kitchens and scrub floors, while the bond screams at me to claim you, to protect you, to give you everything you deserve. But my father's debts are paid." The words were immediate, absolute. "The moment you entered my territory, they were paid in full. You owe nothing. You are owed everything." Celeste's legs threatened to give out beneath her. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. She had been prepared for a lifetime of servitude, for chains and labor and invisibility. She had not been prepared for a king looking at her like she was precious, speaking of mate bonds and queenship like they were inevitable truths. "I don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "Why me? How can you possibly know—" "I know." He caught her hand, the hand rubbed raw by chains, scarred by years of work she shouldn't have had to do, and raised it to his lips. "I know because I have waited 300 years for you. I know because the moment you looked at me, something in my chest that has been silent since the day I was born, finally, started beating." Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't know what to feel. Hope and fear and disbelief tangled together in her chest, overwhelming in their intensity. "This is too fast," she whispered. I can't." "I know." His voice gentled. "I know this is overwhelming. I'm asking you to upend everything you thought your life would be based on the word of a stranger." He pressed another kiss to her knuckles. "So I won't ask you to accept the bond today. I won't ask you to become my queen tomorrow. I'll only ask one thing." "What?" "Stay." His golden eyes held hers, desperate and hopeful and afraid. "Stay, and let me prove that you were never meant to be a servant." Let me show you what it feels like to be valued. Let me earn the trust I'm asking you to give." Celeste looked at him. This king who had stopped a processing line to demand her chains be removed, who had declared her debts paid in the space of a heartbeat, who stood before her now with his heart in his hands, asking for nothing more than a chance. Behind her, the chains lay abandoned on the cobblestones. Before her, a future she'd never imagined stretched out like an endless possibility. "Okay," she breathed. "I'll stay." The king's smile transformed his severe features into something radiant. "Then come, Celeste." He offered his arm like she was already royalty. "Let me show you your home." And as she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow and let him lead her into the castle, Celeste realized something that made her heart race with equal parts terror and wonder. She had been sent here as a servant, but she was never going to be one. The chambers they gave her were larger than her entire family home. Celeste stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, trying to absorb the impossibility of it all. Silk curtains framed windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in fabrics so fine she was afraid to touch them. A fireplace crackled warmly, filling the space with golden light. And through a door on the far side, she could glimpse an attached bathing room with a tub large enough to swim in. "These are the Queen's chambers," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They will be." The king, Ronan, he'd told her his name was Ronan, though she could barely bring herself to use it, stood in the doorway, watching her with those intense golden eyes. "For now, they're simply yours. A place to rest, to recover, to begin to believe that you deserve more than chains and servitude." "I don't know how to be here." Celeste wrapped her arms around herself. "I don't know how to. This morning I was cargo, property, and now you're telling me I'm supposed to be a queen." "Not supposed to be. Ah." Ronan stepped into the room but kept his distance, as if sensing she needed space. "You are my mate, Celeste. That means you are my equal, my partner. The only person in this entire kingdom who has the right to stand beside me. But I don't know anything about being a queen. I can't read court documents. I don't know the noble houses. I've spent my life learning to scrub floors and mend clothes and stay invisible." "Those skills kept you alive." His voice was gentle. "They helped you survive a family that should have protected you. Don't diminish them." He paused. "But you're right that you'll need new skills too, and I'll make sure you have every opportunity to learn them." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Why would you do all this? You don't know me. We met an hour ago. How can you possibly—" "Come here." The request was soft, almost hesitant. Ronan held out his hand, waiting. Celeste hesitated. Every instinct she'd developed over years of survival screamed at her to be cautious, to protect herself, to expect the worst. But something deeper, something she couldn't name, pulled her forward. She placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, she felt it. A jolt of warmth that started in her palm and radiated outward, filling her chest with a heat that had nothing to do with the fire. It felt like recognition, like coming home to a place she'd never been. "That," Ronan said quietly, "is the mate bond. The beginning of it, at least. It's why I know. It's why I'm certain." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I've felt it since the moment you stepped out of that wagon. A pull so strong it took every ounce of control I had not to sweep you into my arms and carry you away from those chains." "Why didn't you?" "Because you were terrified. Because you'd been sold by your own family and sent away in irons. because the last thing you needed was another man taking control of your life without your consent. His jaw tightened. I will never be like the people who hurt you, Celeste. I will ask. I will wait. I will earn your trust step by step, even if it takes years. Tears burned in her eyes. I don't understand you. You will. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. In time, you'll understand everything. For now, just know that you're safe, that no one will ever put chains on you again, that this is your home, for as long as you want it to be. He released her hand and stepped back. A maid will come to help you bathe and dress. There's food being prepared. Real food, not the slop they fed you in that wagon. And when you're ready, if you're ready, I'd like to have dinner with you. A hint of vulnerability crossed his features. But only if you want to. You're not obligated to. I want to. The words surprised her. But they were true, despite everything. The shock, the confusion, the sheer impossibility of the day. She wanted to know more about this king who had demanded her chains be removed before he'd even learned her name. Ronan's smile was soft, relieved. Then I'll see you this evening. He left, and Celeste sank onto the edge of the impossibly soft bed, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had been a debt servant, a piece of property to be traded. Now she was, what, a guest? A future queen? The fated mate of the Lycan king? It didn't seem real. None of it seemed real. But the absence of chains on her wrists was real. The softness of the bed beneath her was real. The warmth still lingering in her palm where Ronan had touched her was real. Maybe, just maybe, the rest of it could be real too. The maid who came to attend her was named Lila, young, cheerful, and utterly delighted by the day's developments. The whole castle is buzzing, she said, as she helped Celeste into the bath. A mate, after 300 years, and the way he looked at you in the courtyard. She sighed dreamily. Half the serving girls are jealous, and the other half are writing terrible poetry about it. Terrible poetry? You know, the king's heart awakened by the maiden in chains, that sort of thing. Lila grinned. Don't worry. I'll make sure the worst of it never reaches you. Despite everything, Celeste laughed. It felt foreign, that sound. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed. Can I ask you something? She said, as Lila helped her wash her hair, carefully, gently, avoiding the raw patches on her wrists where the chains had rubbed. Anything, my lady? My lady. Another impossibility. The king? Ronan? What is he like? Really? Lila was quiet for a moment, considering. He's fair, she said finally. Strict, yes, but fair. He doesn't tolerate cruelty to servants. He remembers our names, asks about our families. Last winter, when the sickness swept through the lower town, he sent palace healers to treat everyone, not just the nobles, but the common folk too. And the mate bond? Do you know anything about it? Only what everyone knows, that Lycans have one true mate, someone destined for them since birth, that the bond is sacred, unbreakable, that most Lycans find their mates within their first century. Lila's hands paused in Celeste's hair. The king has been waiting for 300 years. Everyone assumed he would never find his mate, and then you arrived. In chains, as a debt servant, as his queen. Lila's voice was firm. That's what he called you, isn't it? That's what you are. Celeste closed her eyes, letting the warm water soak away the aches of the journey. Could she really be a queen? Could she really be someone's fated mate, destined and sacred and chosen? She didn't know. She couldn't know. Not yet. But for the first time in as long as she could remember, she had something she'd never had before. Hope. Dinner was served in a private room overlooking the castle gardens. Ronan was already waiting when she arrived, dressed in simple black, his golden eyes lighting up at the sight of her. The gown Lila had chosen, deep blue velvet, finer than anything Celeste had ever worn, suddenly felt right rather than ridiculous. "You look beautiful," he said, rising from his seat. "I look like I'm playing dress-up." "You look like a queen who hasn't realized she's a queen yet." He pulled out her chair, waiting for her to sit. "Give it time." The food was exquisite. Roasted meats, fresh bread, vegetables prepared in ways Celeste had never seen. She tried to eat slowly, to savor each bite, but her body remembered too many missed meals, too many scraped clean plates. She ate until she was full for the first time in months. Ronan watched her with something like pain in his eyes. "When did they last feed you properly?" he asked quietly. "My father's household. Food was scarce. What there was went to my stepmother and her children first." Celeste set down her fork. "I learned to get by on little." "You'll never go hungry again." His voice was fierce with promise. "Never. I swear it." She believed him. That was the strangest part. She believed him completely. "Tell me about the mate bond," she said. "Tell me what it means. What happens now?" So he did. He explained how the bond worked, how it would grow stronger over time, how eventually they would feel each other's emotions and sense each other's presence. He explained that the bond required consent, that he would never claim her without her willing acceptance. "And if I don't accept?" she asked. "If I can't?" Pain flickered across his features, there and gone. "Then I wait," he said simply. "I wait, and I hope, and I prove myself worthy. And if you never accept—" His voice roughened. "Then I spend the rest of my existence loving you from a distance, grateful for whatever moments you're willing to give me." Celeste stared at him across the candlelit table. "You would really do that? Wait forever?" "I've already waited 300 years." He reached across the table and took her hand. "For you, I would wait 300 more." And there, in the warmth of the firelight, with a king holding her hand like she was precious, Celeste felt the first fragile tendrils of trust begin to take root. Maybe she couldn't believe in fairy tales, but maybe, just maybe, she could believe in him. Weeks turned into months, and Celeste began to transform. It happened gradually, so slowly that she almost didn't notice. But the changes were there, accumulating like snowflakes until they formed something undeniable. She gained weight first. Proper meals 3 times a day, with snacks whenever she wanted them, filled out the hollow places in her cheeks and the sharp angles of her collarbone. Her skin lost its sallow pallor. Her hair, once dull and brittle, began to shine. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening inside. She was learning to take up space. Ronan had assigned her tutors, not to turn her into a proper lady, but to give her the tools she'd been denied. She learned to read and write with fluency. She studied history and politics and economics. She discovered she had a talent for numbers that made her tutors exchange impressed glances. "You solved that trade calculation in half the time it takes my advisors," Ronan said one afternoon, reviewing her work with undisguised pride. "It's just mathematics. It's not complicated once you understand the patterns." "Most people never understand the patterns." He set down the paper and looked at her with those golden eyes that still made her heart flutter. "You're extraordinary, Celeste. The more I know you, the more certain I am that fate knew exactly what it was doing when it brought you to me." She ducked her head, still unused to compliments, still half expecting them to be taken away. But they never were. Every day, Ronan found new ways to tell her she was valued, new ways to show her she mattered. He took her riding through the countryside and listened as she marvelled at landscapes she'd only ever seen from wagon windows. He showed her the castle library and watched with quiet joy as she discovered books she'd never dreamed of reading. He introduced her to his advisors and insisted she sit in on council meetings, valuing her input like she was already queen. And every evening, they had dinner together, just the two of them, talking for hours about everything and nothing, building a connection that grew stronger with each passing day. "I think I'm falling in love with you," Celeste said one night. The words escaped without permission, startling them both. Ronan went very still. His golden eyes blazed with something fierce and desperate. "Say that again." I. She took a breath, steadying herself. "I think I'm falling in love with you. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was the night you explained the mate bond. Maybe it was the day you noticed I was cold before I even realized it myself and wrapped your cloak around my shoulders. Maybe it was—" He kissed her before she could finish. It was their first kiss. Soft at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't pull away. She leaned in, wrapping her arms around his neck, letting herself feel for the first time in her life. When they parted, both breathless, his forehead rested against hers. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you," he murmured. "I'll love you until the last star burns out. I'll love you through every lifetime the gods see fit to give us." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I was so afraid to let myself feel this. I was so afraid it would be taken away." "It won't be." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I'm not going anywhere, Celeste. Neither is this love. Neither are you." "I want the bond," she whispered. "I'm ready. I want to be yours." His breath caught. "Are you certain? There's no rush. I told you I would wait." "I'm certain." She had never been more certain of anything. "I spent my whole life waiting for things to get better, hoping that someday someone would see me as more than a burden to be disposed of. And now you're here, and you're real, and you love me." Her voice cracked. "I don't want to wait anymore. I want to start our life together." Ronan kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise and passion, and barely restrained longing. "Tonight," he breathed against her lips. "If you're ready, we seal the bond tonight." "I'm ready." He swept her into his arms and carried her to his chambers. The bonding was everything Celeste had imagined, and more. When Ronan's teeth sank into her neck, marking her as his mate, she felt the bond explode to life, a flood of warmth and light and overwhelming love that brought tears to her eyes. She felt him, not just his body pressed against hers, but his soul reaching for hers. His centuries of loneliness finally ended. His desperate hope when he'd seen her step out of that wagon. His fierce determination to protect her, to cherish her, to give her everything she'd been denied. And she felt him feeling her fear and her hope, and her fragile, growing love. They were one, complete, whole. Afterward, tangled together in silk sheets, Ronan traced the mate mark on her neck with reverent fingers. You're mine now, he said softly. Officially, eternally. Yours, she agreed. And you're mine. Always have been. He pressed a kiss to the mark. Since before I knew your name, since before you were born, my soul has belonged to you for 3 centuries. She turned in his arms to face him, studying his features in the moonlight. This king who had demanded her chains be removed, who had declared her debts paid, who had waited patiently while she learned to believe she was worthy of love. I was sent here as a servant, she whispered. And now you're my queen. He smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his harsh features. Exactly as I said you would be. You were very confident. I was very certain. He pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest. The bond doesn't lie, Celeste. It knew you were mine. It just took a little while for you to believe it too. She smiled against his skin. I believe it now. Good. His arms tightened around her. Because I intend to spend the rest of our existence proving it was true. She closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the bond humming between them like a song. 3 months ago, she had arrived in chains. Now she was bound by something far stronger and infinitely more precious. Love, true love, the kind that waited 300 years and would last 300 more. She had finally found where she belonged. The announcement of the king's bonding sent shockwaves through the kingdom. Celeste had expected resistance. She had prepared herself for whispers and sidelong glances, for nobles who would never accept a debt servant as their queen. What she hadn't expected was her father. The letter arrived a week after the bonding was made public. It was addressed to Lady Celeste, Queen Consort of Blackmore, a title that made her stomach turn, coming from the man who had sold her. My dearest daughter, the letter began. Words cannot express our joy at hearing of your good fortune. Your stepmother and I always knew you were destined for greatness. We would be honored if you would receive us at court so that we might celebrate your happiness together. Celeste read the letter 3 times, waiting for something other than cold fury to surface. Nothing did. He wants to benefit from my position, she said flatly, handing the letter to Ronan. The same man who put me in chains and shipped me off like cargo now wants to bask in my good fortune. Ronan's expression darkened as he read. Through the bond, she felt his rage building. That same cold fury she'd seen in the courtyard the day they met. I'll have him arrested, he said. The moment he crosses into my territory— No. The word surprised them both. No? Ronan looked at her with raised brows. Celeste, this man sold you. He deserves worse than I could give him. Her voice was steady, calm. But I don't want him arrested. I want him here. I want to look him in the eye. I want him to see what I've become. Not because of him, but in spite of him. Understanding dawned in Ronan's golden eyes. You want to face him. I need to face him. She stood, moving to the window, looking out at the kingdom that was now partly hers. I spent my entire childhood being made to feel worthless, being reminded every day that I was a burden, an inconvenience, a problem to be disposed of. If I hide from him now, that little girl inside me will never believe she's truly free. Ronan crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Then we'll bring him here, he said. And you can say whatever you need to say. I'll be right beside you. I know you will. She leaned back into his warmth. That's the only reason I can do this. The summons went out the next day. Lord and Lady Ashworth were commanded to present themselves at Blackmore Castle to answer for their treatment of the Queen. They arrived a week later, travelling in a carriage far finer than the wagon they'd sent their daughter in. Celeste watched from the window of the throne room as they stepped out, her stepmother adjusting her dress, her father smoothing his hair. They looked nervous. Good. Ready? Ronan asked, taking his place on the throne beside hers. Ready? The doors opened, and her family walked in. Lord Ashworth had aged since she'd seen him last. Grey streaked his temples, and his face had grown jowly with drink. Beside him, Lady Ashworth walked with her chin held high, but Celeste could see the fear beneath the bravado, the calculation in her eyes as she took in the throne room, the guards, the king. They stopped before the dais and bowed. Your Majesties, her father said, his voice oily with false warmth. What an honour to be received in your— You sold me! Celeste's voice cut through his pleasantries like a blade. Her father's mouth snapped shut. You sold your own daughter to pay gambling debts. She rose from her throne, descending the steps slowly. You put me in chains. You loaded me into a wagon like livestock. You sent me away with the expectation that I would spend the rest of my life scrubbing floors. Now, Celeste, that's not quite— Don't. The word was ice. Don't try to rewrite what happened. Don't try to pretend you did me a favor or gave me an opportunity. You disposed of me because I was inconvenient. Because keeping me cost money you wanted to spend on cards and wine and your precious wife's dresses. Lady Ashworth's face had gone pale. Lord Ashworth's mouth opened and closed like a fish. For 19 years, I lived in your house, Celeste continued. I cleaned your floors and mended your clothes and ate your scraps and I tried so hard, to be good enough, to be worthy of love, to be something other than a burden. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. And the moment you had a chance to get rid of me, you took it without hesitation. The debts, her father started, were your responsibility, your failure, your addiction. Celeste stopped directly in front of him. I was a child who needed protection, and you traded me away like currency. Silence hung in the hall. Her father stared at her with something that might have been shame. Her stepmother had shrunk into herself, the bravado completely gone. Do you know what the worst part is? Celeste asked quietly. The worst part is that I spent years believing you were right about me, believing I was worthless, believing I deserved to be thrown away. She stepped back, returning to the dais, to Ronan's side. I don't believe that anymore. Celeste, please. Her father's voice was desperate now. We're family. Surely you can forgive. Forgive? She almost laughed. I'm not even sure I remember what that word means. You certainly never taught it to me. Ronan rose from his throne, his presence filling the room like a storm. Lord Ashworth, he said, his voice cold and terrible. You sent my mate to me in chains. You treated the future queen of this realm like refuse to be discarded. By rights, I could have you executed for the insult alone. Lord Ashworth went white as fresh snow. But my queen has asked that you be given a chance to understand what you threw away. Ronan's arm wrapped around Celeste's waist. So you will not be executed. You will not be imprisoned. Instead, you will be escorted back to your estate, where you will live out the rest of your days, knowing that the daughter you disposed of became everything you will never be. He let that sink in. Your gambling debts, however, are no longer cleared. The arrangement that brought Celeste to me is void. I will not profit from your cruelty. You will repay every coin you owe through labor if necessary. And if you ever attempt to contact my queen again, if you ever try to benefit from her position or claim credit for her success, I will forget my mercy." Guards stepped forward, and Lord Ashworth scrambled backward. "Wait," Celeste said. Everyone froze. She descended the steps one final time, stopping before her father. "I want you to know something," she said quietly. "I am happy. Truly, genuinely happy. Probably for the first time in my life. I have a husband who loves me, a kingdom that needs me, a future brighter than anything you ever allowed me to imagine." She held his terrified gaze. "And I achieved all of this without you, in spite of you. You don't get credit for who I've become. You don't get to share in my success. You get to live with the knowledge that you threw away something precious. And I get to thrive without you." She turned her back on him. "Take them away." As the guards escorted her family from the hall, their protests echoing off the stone, Celeste felt something release in her chest. A weight she'd been carrying for 19 years finally lifted. Ronan's arms wrapped around her from behind. "I am so proud of you," he murmured against her hair. "I'm proud of me too." She turned in his embrace, looking up at the man who had changed everything. "I faced him. I said the things I needed to say. And now—" She smiled, and it felt like freedom. "Now I'm ready to move forward." "Forward," Ronan agreed. "Together." He kissed her, soft and reverent, and Celeste leaned into him with her whole heart. The past was behind her. The future was finally hers to claim. The coronation was held on the anniversary of Celeste's arrival at Blackmoor. 1 year to the day since a wagon had rolled through the castle gates carrying a girl in chains. 1 year since a king had looked at that girl and seen a queen. 1 year of transformation, of healing, of learning to believe in her own worth. Celeste stood before the mirror in the Queen's chambers, truly hers now, in every way that mattered, and studied the woman who looked back at her. She wore a gown of midnight blue, embroidered with silver stars that caught the light like captured constellations. Her auburn hair was swept up and woven with tiny sapphires. The mate mark on her neck was visible above her neckline, displayed with pride rather than hidden in shame. She looked like a queen. More importantly, she felt like one. "Ready?" Ronan appeared in the mirror behind her, resplendent in his formal blacks, his golden eyes soft with love. "I think so." She turned to face him. "Is it strange that I'm not nervous?" "Not strange at all." He cupped her face in his hands. "You've already done the hardest part. You've already become who you were always meant to be. The coronation is just the world catching up." She rose on her toes to kiss him, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. A year ago, she hadn't known what a loving touch felt like. Now, she couldn't imagine a day without it. "I have something for you," Ronan said when they parted. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. A coronation gift. Inside was a pendant, a delicate silver chain holding a single sapphire, deep blue and flawless. "It belonged to my mother," Ronan said quietly. "She wore it at her own coronation 3 centuries ago. I've been waiting to give it to someone worthy of it." His voice roughened with emotion. "I've been waiting for you." Tears pricked at Celeste's eyes as he fastened the chain around her neck. The sapphire settled against her collarbone, cool and perfect. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It suits you." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "She would have loved you, my mother. She would have seen exactly what I see. a woman of courage and kindness and unshakable strength. I hope I can live up to that. You already have. He offered his arm. Come, my queen. Your kingdom awaits. The great hall was filled to bursting, nobles from every territory, dignitaries from neighbouring kingdoms, common folk who had travelled for days to witness the coronation of a queen who had once been one of them. They packed the hall to overflowing. A sea of faces turned toward the dais where the ancient throne waited. And in the front row, standing with pride in her eyes, was Lila, the maid who had become Celeste's closest friend, now elevated to lady-in-waiting. Celeste walked down the aisle on Ronan's arm. She didn't hurry, didn't shrink, didn't try to make herself small or invisible. She walked with her head held high, meeting the eyes of everyone who looked at her, letting them see exactly who she was. A debt servant, an orphan in all but name, a woman who had arrived in chains and would now wear a crown. At the altar, the high priestess waited, ancient and silver-haired, her eyes holding the wisdom of centuries. Celeste of Blackmore, the priestess intoned. You have been chosen by the king, claimed by the sacred mate bond. Do you accept the crown and all the duties it entails? Do you swear to serve and protect this kingdom, to stand beside your king as his equal and his partner, to lead with wisdom and compassion? I do. Her voice rang clear through the hall. I swear to serve this kingdom with everything I am, to remember where I came from, and to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. To be the queen I needed when I was a child, one who sees the forgotten and values the discarded. The priestess smiled. Then kneel, child, and rise a queen. Celeste knelt on the cold stone. The priestess lifted the crown, a delicate circlet of silver and sapphires, ancient and beautiful, and placed it upon her head. Rise, Queen Celeste of Blackmore. She rose. The hall erupted. Cheers and howls of celebration echoed off the vaulted ceiling, a wave of sound that washed over her like a blessing. Through the bond, she felt Ronan's pride, fierce and bright and overwhelming, and she reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. Your queen, he roared, raising their joined hands high, and the cheering doubled. The feast that followed was unlike anything Celeste had ever experienced. There was music and dancing and more food than she could have imagined in her hungriest days. There were toasts in her honor, nobles approaching to bow and offer congratulations, children presenting her with flowers they'd picked themselves. But the moment she treasured most came late in the evening, when she slipped away to the servants' quarters. The other debt servants, the 5 women who had arrived with her that day, who had expected lives of drudgery and received dignity instead, were waiting for her. They had been given positions of respect in the household, trained for better work, treated fairly as Ronan had promised. Your Majesty, one of them said, curtsying awkwardly. We didn't expect. You shouldn't have come down here. I wanted to see you. Celeste took the woman's hands. I wanted you to know that I haven't forgotten, that I will never forget what we went through together, or where we came from. You're really queen now, another woman said, wonder in her voice. A debt servant, a queen. I didn't think such things were possible. Neither did I. Celeste smiled through sudden tears. But they are. They're possible because people like us deserve more than we were taught to expect. We deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. She embraced each of them in turn, these women who understood what she had survived, who had witnessed her transformation from the very beginning. If you ever need anything, she said, Come to me, not as servants to a queen, but as friends, as sisters. That door will always be open. Ronan found her an hour later, sitting on the steps of the servants' entrance, looking up at the stars. "Everyone's asking where the queen has gone," he said, settling beside her. "Let them ask." She leaned into his warmth. "I'm exactly where I need to be." He wrapped his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her hair. "1 year ago," she said quietly, "I arrived here in chains. I expected to spend my life scrubbing floors and being invisible. I expected nothing, hoped for nothing, dreamed of nothing. And now I'm a queen." She laughed, the sound still strange and wonderful on her tongue. "Now I have a husband who loves me, a kingdom that needs me, and a future so bright I can barely look at it directly. You deserve all of it. I'm starting to believe that." She turned to face him, this king who had seen a queen in a girl in chains. "Thank you, Ronan, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for saying not servant, future queen, when everyone else saw only chains, for loving me before I knew how to love myself." He cupped her face in his hands. "Thank you for believing me, for staying, for letting me prove that the bond was real, that my love was real, that you were worthy of everything I wanted to give you." She kissed him, soft and deep, under the stars that seemed to shine brighter than they ever had before. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." He pressed his forehead to hers. "My mate, my queen, my everything." 1 year ago, she had been sent as a servant. Now, she was a queen who would never forget where she came from, and who would spend the rest of her reign making sure no one else was ever thrown away like she had been. She had been discarded. She had been dismissed. She had been sold. And she had risen anyway. If you enjoyed Celeste and Ronan's story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. Leave a comment below telling me your favorite part, and I'll see you in the next one.